Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where we like to explore in depth and analyze issues current to our day. Now, what I'm going to deal with in this segment is the idea, or should I say 6 ideas or reasons why men, and I'm going to deal with men right now, are not getting married. And maybe some of the reasons why that's not a good thing for them or for society. Anyway, before I begin with those, and believe me, I'm sure there's many people who's going to find this very controversial, so do stay tuned. Anyway, before I begin, I would encourage people to subscribe to this later. If it's on YouTube or other video platforms, subscribe to this channel so you can keep up on future shows. Also, check out my if you like sci-fi that deals with issues of the future of marriage and family, then check out my sci-fi book, The Destiny of Our Past. You can find that on Amazon as well as other platforms. And see what you think about where we may, I think we are, heading for. Anyway, so let's just get down to this and see what things are keeping guys from getting married. You know, the thing is that the rates of marriage are lower now in the Western world than they ever have been. That's right, lower than they ever have been. And that is not too good for a society. But I would like to look at this more on the personal level, obviously, rather than societal. And what are the reasons, but also why might the benefits outweigh the possible disadvantages? All right? So, let's go on. So, the number one, I think, and I've seen it so many times, is that many of our millennial males, as well as a good portion of the Generation X men, have experienced divorce in their own families, where their parents have divorced. And this, I don't care how much feminist as well as some academics during the primarily the 1970s used to say that divorce has no bearing whatsoever on how a child turns out. Well, it's, there's ample evidence out there that that's not true. Okay, it does affect. I'm just going to center on males, though. You get a male who's forming their identity. Okay, and this sounds quite Freudian, but it's true. A young man is forming his identity, his idealization and introjection of his father's ideals, somewhere between the ages of 4 and, in Freud's view, 4 to 6, but I would say it goes a little longer, maybe 4 to 10. And his view of the world is mostly centered around how his father interacts with the world. So if you have a situation where suddenly there's a divorce, and most divorces in the United States are initiated by women, we won't go into the reasons for that, maybe being the case, but suddenly a young man sees his role model, who he's basing how he behaves on, thrown out, demasculinated, told he's not important. He can come and visit on weekends. And the problem then, of course, exists that often after a divorce, the parents, because of jobs or whatever, wind up separated by long distances. But the young child still is thinking, well, why doesn't dad visit as often? Let's say if mom moves clear across the state or into another state. He's not seeing the difficulties the father will have doing that. And so this creates a dilemma. And so he starts to maybe simultaneously feel negative to his father. And then he also is starting to question whether he ever wants to get married. Either A, because he sees that it's a risky proposition, or B, that he maybe feels like he's just going to be just like his dad and won't be able to hold a marriage together, even if it was his mother who was the reason for the divorce. Maybe she found someone she liked better, or, just became a victim of today's let's get down on the husband for anything that goes wrong. A mentality that infects not just, modern entertainment, but also a lot of churches. Sometimes the most lethal place for marriages is in churches, because there's a place where you go to worship and you trust the people and so forth, but then notions can get conveyed. I mean, I've known people who've actually been very devout in their religion, but then they remarry later, and they don't want their wives to go to their particular church because maybe they saw some of the facilitation that led to their divorce taking place within those circles. That's not an indictment against religion. It's just, I'm just saying that it happens. And the thing is this. The thing is this. The boy grows up. He sees his friends going through divorce. He becomes insecure. Maybe 50 years ago, it was sort of like get married, see what happens. I don't mean, we'll just get divorced, but there was more of this, let's just do it. There was kind of that leap of faith, so to speak. And you figured that, we like to do this, we like to be together, we like this, we have kind of the same goals in life, so let's get married. And then there was this idea that still persisted 50 years ago that, you either were able to kind of smooth the edges for both people to where it was more of a compatible situation, or you just kind of learn to live with each other's differences. I mean, I've heard many cases where, these people have been married for 60, 70, 80 years will say that, oh my gosh, sometimes I hated my spouse. But that was sometimes, not all the time. This was at least the reason why a lot of people did get married. Yes, a lot of those people did get divorced that got married 50 years ago, which gave rise, of course, to the generation we have today that's a little gun shy of getting married. But there was still this, let's give it a try. And that seems to be something a lot of men just don't want to try out nowadays. They figure that it's just not worth it. They don't want to be in a situation like there was this one movie, Starlet, I read quite some time ago, where she said, why bother she said something to the effect of when she dated, she was just kind of figuring out something to the effect of who, if she'll get along with that person someday when he comes to visit the kids. So it was an assumption that, you'll get divorced someday, and so forth. And just that assumption, too, that a lot of people found, especially a lot of males, who may have grown up in situations where mom was the instigator of the divorce. And I'm not talking about a situation where the dad was abusive or anything. But like I said before, I've seen many cases where women have filed for divorce because they were sleeping around on their husband. They filed divorce. They got custody of the young children, which was really weird, especially in one case I know of where even though she just kind of said, here, you want him? Since she was legally, still their guardian, and they were living with him and had for a long time, he was still paying her child support, even though he was the one raising the kids. A lot of guys see these horror stories, and they don't want to take a risk. But I'll have to say this. I said I was going to do the pro and con, or I should say the con and pro. And that is that there is no guarantees in life. Okay? It's like the joke I once heard on some comedy show. It has this old man, and he's sitting on the porch, and he's going, "Yep, I just got married to a 24-year-old," and I think it's his son, or someone knows him, is going, "Well, my gosh, what about when death occurs? What then?" And he says, "Well, if she dies, then I'll marry another one." Because, he didn't get the hint that it was him that was obviously, probably going to die young. But I have seen this, where an older man will marry a young woman, and then he outlives her. And so there is no guarantees in anything. Nothing in life. Everything is a risk. I mean, just getting up in the morning, you might get hit by a car. You might catch a disease. Okay? You might go to the doctor and find out some ache or ailment that you have is cancer. I mean, you just don't know. And so you can't be avoidant. If you're avoidant, you don't grow. If you don't take a risk, you don't get a reward. Sure, you can decide, well, I'm just going to live in this, apartment and maybe have a dog or a cat or something and someday just die. But what kind of existence is that? Seriously. I mean, is this what we're coming to, that many of our millennials and older Gen Xers are looking at a life of loneliness? And you may think, oh, well, I won't be lonely. I'll have friends. Do you know what you get? When you're in your 20s or even your 30s, you may still have a bunch of your friends that are single. But you know what happens? They start pairing off. They start getting married. And little by little, you cease to really have that connection to them. Because when they get married, they're no longer as available to, go out and spend the evening having fun, or going on just a spur-of-the-moment fishing trip on the weekend. It just doesn't exist that way. In fact, the number one determination as to whether friends stay together is their marriage relationships. So if you have two good friends, but they'll both wind up getting married within, let's say, the same year, chances are they're going to stay as friends and hang out. But if you have a situation where all of a sudden you're the single guy and your best friend is married, then it winds up that you become kind of the leftover. What do you talk about? It's kind of that same thing when it comes to children. Often when people start having kids, that's the one thing that will unite them together is children. I'm not talking about the couple. I'm talking about other couples. Okay, they tend to find that it's easier to talk with and communicate and hang out and relate to people who have kids, like they do. So if you're the leftover, if you're the one who thinks they're going to keep all of those relationships that they have now, and they're just going to be indefinite like some sort of silly TV sitcom, it's not going to happen that way. Okay? In all likelihood, life just occurs, and some people will get on with some of these traditional forms of living. The ones that don't may just wind up lonely. All right? Oh, I guess you could wait until at some point some of your friends, maybe 20, 30 years later, start getting divorced or something, if they do, and then you could hang out with them. I don't know. When are we going to talk about that? What are you going to do then? I mean, I'm going to get to that statistic about divorce in just a few moments too, and so really the idea too. Well, I'll just talk about that now. When you see divorce statistics, and sometimes it makes you scared, like, oh my gosh, half of marriages end in divorce. Flip a coin and see which one it'll be for me. Not necessarily true. That's 50% refers to the number of people getting married that year of getting divorced. Many people have been married 5, 6, 7 times. That inflates the statistics. Most people, when they get married, they stay married. All right? It is most get married, stay married. And if you've got two people that fit each other in important characteristics, then the chance of divorce is even less. Okay? So, for instance, if you belong to the same religion, or if you're both not religious. Although I think there's more of a danger there, because often non-religious people can get married and then one of them just, actually, a couple years later becomes religious. So there you have a problem. But usually if people fit, I know you have the whole, TV drama thing about opposites or people from one side of the track getting married to someone from the other side of the track. And just living happily ever after. There's, I can think of at least one Disney movie that was like that, one of the cartoons. It's more of a risk. So, it used to be in the old days, people married someone that lived within, about 5 miles of where they grew up. So if you're working class, you married someone from a working class background. It doesn't mean that you stay working class. It just meant that you both could relate to each other. Okay? So even though you may move up or move down, who knows, on the social economic scale, you still had that same background that you could relate to. So ultimately, don't believe the statistic that 50% of marriages end in divorce, because it's not true. It's a statistic. All right? And it includes marriages in general. So think about it. Think about some of these movie stars you see that have been married 8 and 9 times. Think about maybe people in your own life that you know that have been married 3 and 4 times. That all gets added in. Okay? So, very important to take a look at there. And like I said, nothing in life is guaranteed, ever. So, it's not like you say, oh, well, I'll just take this job at a hamburger flipping joint because I don't have to take a risk that I might get fired from something that was more demanding. Well, sure. Play it safe. Deliver pizza. If you're delivering pizza, you might get in a car wreck. It might not even be your fault, but you might still wind up fired. Just trying to think of a really, you can't join the military if have a safe job, because you might get killed in combat. See, there's nothing out there that's safe. Same is true of marriage. Okay? But most of the time, most marriages do turn out. Now, you have a second reason some people bring up, and that is they don't feel they can commit to one person. They feel that it goes against, especially men, it goes against that whole concept of evolutionary biology, that a man is designed to spread his seed and so forth. There's a problem with that. And no, it's not just the more people you sleep with, the more chance you get of catching a very nasty sexually transmitted disease. Or think about that when you're thinking about divorce. The more people you sleep with, the more chances you may wind up getting someone pregnant. They might, they say, well, I'm on birth control. You get them pregnant when they weren't really on birth control, or it fails, and you're still kind of on the line for child support, even though you didn't get the benefit of the possible life in marriage. Okay? So there's lots of guys out there that never will marry, but they get someone pregnant, and they wind up paying child support. And probably it's a little bit more awkward visiting the kid in those situations, because you never really have been part of the family. Okay, you may have just been a bed partner of the mother. Okay, so think about that for a moment. And the other thing is, if you really look at it from a biological point of view, married men produce more children than single men. Okay, so it's not like you got all these single guys running around out there making women pregnant. Okay, married men produce many more children, as seen as a whole. If you took 100 single men and 100 married men, you're going to get way more children produced by the married men. Okay, so biology really favors marriage, and the idea that you're just going out there and living some sort of strange hookup lifestyle that is presented in fiction on television, it's not the case. And as you get older, you may think, oh yeah, men get more defined and refined and all this stuff. Who's to say that? Not everyone's going to grow up and look like some sort of 1970s businessman, muscular, gray hair, and powerful, and all that kind of stuff. You might lose your hair, lose your shape. Most men do, and you're not exactly going to be the first choice of that young 22-year-old gal at the singles bar. Okay, pretty soon you're going to the trying to pick up people at the nostalgia dances or something. So you're basically going to be, well, it's sad. Okay, you're not going to, but you're not. The idea that that marriage limits your freedom, I'd say it limits certain freedoms, but increases others. Okay, it gives you more opportunities. A lot more opportunities. And again, I'm going to repeat that if you're talking about biology, unless a person's a sperm donor, which very, very, very few men qualify to be, then your contribution to the gene pool will be much less if you remain single. Now, number 3, again, it's kind of a subset of number 2, the idea of you lose your freedom. Okay, you may lose some freedom. Like I said before, I was talking about the freedom to go and pretend like you're spreading your seed. But there is the other idea too, that suddenly now, instead of maybe on a Saturday going fishing, you might have to go shopping with the wife, or there's chores that you need to work with getting done at home, and so forth. So you're losing some freedoms there. But you know what? You're not alone. Okay, if you're just having these like one night stands, which very few people, by the way, really have, like this Hollywood vision of, James Bond sort of one night stands. You're basically, most of the time, single men are alone. And that's why gaming is so popular amongst single men. It gives them something to do besides, in the old days, all the single guys I knew, especially when they reached by the time they reached about 30 and above, they were very much into TV. It's pretty sad, actually, where, you're watching the TV schedule. I guess nowadays you've got all kinds of other choices with cable and so forth, but still, the idea of having a built-in companion to go and do things with is much greater than the loss of freedom, or the so-called loss of freedom. Okay? Much more fun to even watch TV with a wife. It's much more fun to go for a stroll in the park. Actually, if you're alone, a stroll in the park can be very depressing. And I know this sounds very depressing talking about, and real downer, and probably some people are switching off right now. But the truth of the matter is, you got to face what reality is, and that is that being single generally, mostly equals being alone. Okay, and the TV version is not reality. All right, the TV version is not the reality of the situation. Okay, number 4. I've heard this sometimes. People will say, oh my gosh, when I get married, my wife's just going to suddenly, right now she's in great shape, muscular or fit and trim, or however you like, what you find attractive. And I've seen so many times where, within just even the first year, she's going to not look anything like that. Instead of being, dressing in designer jeans, she'll be buying polyester pants at one of the big box stores. That's a risk. All right? And that's something that sometimes I note when it comes to women, who's like, I'm not going to have kids because I'm going to keep my shape. But, by the time she reaches 50, it doesn't matter whether she had 8 kids or whether she had no kids, she's probably going to look pretty much the same. Okay? Gravity does its job. Biology does its job. And you can avoid biology and reproduction, but it's only going to be a very short term that you might avoid some stretch marks, because eventually your body's going to age, and especially past menopause, it's going to look like you're going to pretty much be the same. Now, when it comes to men, yes, I have seen statistics that within the first year of marriage, the average man gains, and this was a long time ago, it's probably more now, it was like 20 pounds within the first year of marriage. Well, you're eating better. You're not just throwing on some ramen or some sort of frozen dinner, or just buying a pizza on the way home. Yeah, I'm sure there's someone out there. Yeah, but I cook really nicely. Okay, fine. But I'm just saying in general. The thing is that I think a lot depends on what your mindset is. If you marry someone that has a very positive mindset towards keeping in shape, then you're not going to have to worry about her falling out of shape. And if you have a really positive attitude towards keeping in shape, you can maintain it. If the only reason you've stayed in shape is so you're attractive to the opposite sex, so that you can get a date, then that's kind of superficial. I mean, I'm sorry, it just is. Because when when you're married, you've got that date every day. And yes, there is this kind of tendency of, well, no, I don't have to dress up, or I don't have to be this or this or this. So one thing I've always said is, when you're dating someone, the first date, don't take someone to a fancy restaurant. Go on a hike in the rain in the woods. All right? That's one, or on the beach. Don't be artificial. Find out what the other person's like. I've known people who've wanted to figure out whether their future wife would like kids. So he would take her places like a park or something where there's lots of kids playing. And, sometimes a woman will say something like, oh, I wish people would take better care of their kids. Be kind of gripey and negative towards kids. Whereas others would be just like, oh, look, that looks like so much fun. And blah, blah. That's how you can kind of figure out who is the one that you want to marry. And so, you're investigating. It doesn't mean you have to find out every single solitary thing about a person, but find out what they're like on the big crucial things. And if physical fitness is one of them, even after a woman has 3 or 4 kids, or more, if she's committed to physical fitness, she will keep herself in good shape. I don't see too many women who were track stars in high school who would be comfortable just, going and buying a whole bunch of stuff at a big box store and sitting on the couch and watching TV all day. All right? That is just the way it is. The idea that, oh my gosh, I'll just let myself go. Well, that means that you haven't really internalized the importance of staying in shape yourself. And what about her? Maybe she doesn't want you to let yourself go. There are a lot of women who are married, that keep themselves in shape, that are married to guys that are out of shape. So, again, it's what you're coming into the marriage with. The attitudes that you have then. By the way, those actually translate out into the way the kids are. I have actually seen this quite a bit of times. If you have a couple that are really, it doesn't even have to be athletic. They could just be really into keeping active. You can kind of be sure that their daughter will have that same attitude, because we learn from our parents' examples. I've seen families where one parent is really active and the other one isn't. But usually the kids will look and see which one they want to emulate, which one they want to follow. They see maybe one parent who's complaining, oh, my joints hurt, my knees hurt, my this, I feel so achy, my stomach, my headache, those kinds of things. And the other one that's active and does things all the time, they're like, oh, I feel great today, and so forth. That's a big testimonial to kids. So if you've got a girlfriend or whatever who, maybe one of her parents is out of shape and the other one's in great shape, but she keeps herself in shape, probably she'll continue that. Now, of course, if this was designed for women, this show today, right now, I will do one for women later, then it would be true for them as well, looking at you. Okay, so this whole idea that you're just going to let yourself go is ridiculous. All right? Now, some people say, and I can see this by watching TV nowadays, that the cost of marriage when it comes to getting married is astronomical. Engagement ring, wedding ring, big fancy weddings and stuff like this. You know what I say to this? Reject TV. Okay, now first of all, yes, a lot of women have a fairy tale view of how marriage should be. But usually she's looking towards the husband, too, to see what he's really into. The stuff you see on TV, they have all these shows on about wedding dresses or marriages and all this honeymoon stuff. This is really, I think it's actually quite damaging, because it reinforces this idea that, you get married in debt. And I don't think that's a good idea. You get married in a church, doesn't cost that much money. That's the way most of my friends, when I was younger, got married. They got married in a church. What? You paid the preacher. I mean, you of course you got a wedding dress, but you didn't, have to go someplace in New York on the or Los Angeles in the fanciest section to find the dress. I mean, in theory, you're going to wear it once. That's where wedding dresses come from. The whole idea that Queen Victoria bought a dress that was white. Before, you just wore your best clothes when you got married. But she bought a white one so that it would just, she didn't have to worry about it getting dirty, because that was the only time she was going to get married. But then it kind of caught on. People thought, oh, this is a great way to make money. Let's promote this idea of a white wedding dress, and then it ceased to be just a plain white dress to where then it started getting, you have to have pearls on it. You got to do this and this and this and this. I mean, try to find a gal who, to be honest, I mean, you'd be better off, doing a nude wedding. I know there's a lot of couples that do that. nowadays. You can even do that in Vegas, but it seems like that'd be a problem with the in-laws. They might not be as much into it, but maybe if you're kind of, into the organic food scene and hippie scene, they might be. But ultimately, what counts is the marriage itself. Save the money, and just indicate that it means more to you to get married and be stable, and it's a sign of love than having a designer label on a dress that no one's going to notice the designer label anyway, and pretty much you can make a dress with fake pearls and no one's going to notice the difference. All right. I mean, seriously. If nothing else, go to China and have it made there. That's, I think, where a lot of the wedding dresses are made anyway. Probably cheaper to fly, I don't know, check into it. Probably cheaper to fly to China and get a tailor-made dress made there for a lot cheaper, and then just bring it home. And you get a chance to have a pre-honeymoon in a really fantastic country. So, the whole thing with rings, I know there's this idea that was promoted by the diamond industry of diamond rings and that sort of thing. But ultimately, I've known couples that have been married for 50 years and they have a very simple wedding band or a small diamond. I mean, we've just put so much into this idea of having this huge reception, and even now some people rent out in Europe. They rent out, royal cottages and stuff for the wedding reception. And seriously, again, television has polluted the minds of a lot of people. But if someone's truly in love with someone, they can work together and get something going that is sentimental, meaningful, and also within the budget. All right, so you don't wind up, paying through the nose. And finally, a lot of guys are scared that women have too high of expectations. I've talked to a lot of women on that particular issue. And at first, there may be, because of our society, the way it's really promoted, this idea that, you're looking for the, a lot of women have this really great idea of marrying this guy who's dashing and something from, children's TV image or a modern Hollywood piece of propaganda. But the thing is that most women are actually looking for someone they can talk to, someone that is intelligent. I knew this gal. It was really funny. She met this guy, a really gorgeous gal. She meets this guy on a business trip. And she just, she spent a bunch of time with him, just totally fell for him. Totally. And she wrote this heartfelt letter to him. Of how much fun she had and her feelings and this kind of stuff. And he's an intelligent guy too, but he writes back going, "Hey, that's really neat. Yeah, I had fun too." Needless to say, she lost interest immediately. Okay, you got to communicate. Communication is what women look at. That's why sometimes you wind up with, professors marrying students from really wealthy backgrounds, even though the professor makes about the same amount of money, really, as a public school teacher. But they communicate well. This is why psychopaths wind up with the prettiest wives, is because they communicate well. You've got to be able to present yourself and not think that all women are looking for a millionaire driving a fancy car, because they're not. Okay? There are a certain number that are. And the ones that get their own TV shows make it bad for the rest of them. But ultimately, women want someone who, yes, they don't want to have someone that's going to be on welfare, But at the same time, they're not necessarily averse to the idea of marrying someone who maybe is, maybe a welder, even though she is a trained doctor. I've seen these kinds of situations. At first, when I started seeing this, and this is when I met some of these kinds of couples back in the 1980s and 90s, where you're thinking, oh yeah, I mean, she's got this education, she's a professor or a doctor or whatever, and then you find out the husband's a carpenter. And I don't mean owning his own carpentry shop. I mean, that's his job. But sometimes just brilliant individual. Okay, so yes, there has been a social change, and yes, there is still this idea that most women have that they're going to marry someone that's equal to or greater than them socioeconomically, but it's not necessarily the case. And not all women are gold diggers. Only a small percentage really are. Not all women measure you according to your bank account or how much money they expect that you will make. There is a nesting instinct, I still think. The idea that women still have this idea that when I'm pregnant with a child, it's I can't go out there, and it's still part of our nature. I can't go out there and hunt deer and hunt yams or whatever it is in the jungle when I'm 8 months pregnant. So there is kind of this idea that someone's going to have to be there for them, but it's not necessarily that every woman is looking for something from some sort of chick flick on TV where she's swept off her feet by this guy who is going to take her on a helicopter ride, and on their honeymoon they're going to spend 3 weeks traveling the entire world. Okay, it's not the case. But a lot of guys have been put off towards approaching women because of that. And yet, at the same time, we find many men who have hardly anything, and sometimes just outright scoundrels. They don't have anything going for them, and yet they still have one thing going for them, and that's that they do take the chance. They do make the approach. They do get to know someone, and they wind up married to them. Sometimes living off of them, but at that same time, if you do have an income of any sorts, you have a job, you've shown stability, I don't see if there's any reason why you should say, oops, well, no, she's got, I have a high school, no, I have a 2-year degree and I have this job, and she's got a PhD in such and such. Well, in all likelihood, you'll, be able to help her pay off her student loan or something. Just because she has a PhD does not mean that she's making more money than you, and even if she was making more money than you, if she sees you as an equal, which most women would, especially as times are changing, then yes, take a chance. Now, I've gone through 6 reasons why men are not getting married now. I know there's a whole bunch of other reasons. If someone's going to be saying, yeah, but, or they disagree with what I've said. And you're right. But, the thing is that the main problem I have with this idea of men going their own way, or MGTOW, or whatever you call it, is that it's kind of taking a lot of generalities and making them the rule that applies to everyone out there. And yet they complain about women doing that to men, but then they turn around and do the same thing. Fortunately, they're a minority. Fortunately, the women that do that kind of thing, they're a minority. But ultimately, we have to look at each other as equals. Look at each other for our potentials. Feel good about ourselves when it comes to making the effort to try to form a marriage relationship. And that starts from the first, hi there, what's your name? Approach. But ultimately, married men live longer, they're happier, They have sex more often. They produce more children. They have higher financial status. They're healthier. My gosh, if you really look at all the advantages to getting married, the disadvantages pale in comparison. And I didn't even talk about the benefits to society if guys and girls are getting married. I don't think I have to. I think just at the individual level, it's a fantastic thing, and it will better your life, statistically speaking. In the first half, I dealt with the whole aspect of, 6 reasons why men are not getting married as much, I should say, nowadays, and why they're avoiding it. And one thing I didn't really deal with that I think I should go into in a little bit more detail, perhaps, is the idea of competition. And I'm starting to think that one of the reasons why we have a problem with the lack of marriage nowadays has to do with the fact that we have diminished the importance of competition in our society. Well, that's right. We've actually diminished it. When I was in physical education, there was this idea that, in high school, late 70s, there was an idea that if you were able to run around the track at a certain speed, or be able to do a certain number of pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, those kinds of things, that was the determination of your grade. And then we got more of a touchy-feely sort of mindset that started coming in. That I guess we started replacing, as they retired, the teachers who were, your Korean War veterans and so forth, who often did teach the male physical education courses, at least, like a drill sergeant. And maybe it was because of the culture of the time, but from what I could see, the female ones were also more the drill sergeant towards the girls' classes. Yes, they did have the boy and girl classes divided in those days. And when we got this touchy-feely group come along, these were people that felt like, this may hurt the feelings of the students, and maybe it will make them not like to do physical education type stuff, physical fitness stuff. So maybe we should start grading on effort. Well, that worked for a while because you still had that ethic in there of, I got to go out there and really sweat to get around the track. I've really got to do a lot of push-ups and that sort of thing. But eventually, it got to the point where, students will work as hard as they have to. All right? They'll study as hard as they perceive they have to, and usually not much more. That's human nature. Okay? If someone tells you to lay 50 bricks and you're being paid to lay 50 bricks, you don't usually decide, what? I did that pretty fast. I'll put 20 more up. And if it doesn't mean that you're going to get paid more for doing the extra 20, then you're not going to do the extra 20. And the same goes for education, and the same, of course, for physical education. So students started realizing that they could just play the system. Oh yeah, that was a really great run, coach, and that's what they just started. And they saw that there were students that were just walking around the track, and they were getting just as good a grade as the students that were running. So it decreases everyone's performance. Now, sure, you had the ones that really were on the track team or out for football or baseball or something, and they knew they had to keep in good shape because they were competing against other schools, usually in front of a large percentage of the student body on game night. So they would continue, working out hard. But you started seeing a major number of the students just decide, I'll just do what I have to do. and still, be able to get a good grade. And this ethic, unfortunately, permeates other areas of life. Now, you see the obesity epidemic that's taking over in the United States, where something like a third of our population's obese. Okay? I mean, that's unheard of in human history amongst the general population. And we're not the only country suffering from that, too, I will note. But we kind of, sometimes those lessons you learn in PE, that you have to compete, and there can only be one winner, those kinds of things actually will motivate you in other areas as well. You're doing a math problem and it's like really taking you a long time to finish it once you get up to the higher levels of math. You can remember back to, I didn't give up, and maybe this is going to be more subconscious or conscious. You're going to remember, I didn't give up when I had to go out there and run 2 miles. So why should I give up now? It creates a sense of discipline and control that then can go into other areas. But we're raising a lot of our young people, especially guys, with this idea that competition is in some way bad. When my one of my sons, he was coming into grade school, and it was funny that he could read at about a I can't remember what it was, 8th or 9th grade comprehension level. His math was really good. He knew, his geography was better than most American adults, and all these other areas. And he's actually a pretty sociable person. And we asked that he be tested, and maybe instead of going into 1st grade, he could go directly into 2nd grade. He could have gone higher, but the school complied. They did the test, and they said, yes, he's way, way ahead. It's very impressive. But there's only one problem. He seems to be really competitive. I'm not joking, by the way. I'm not joking. That's what the school said. He seems to be really competitive, and maybe he needs to be socialized more with his peers. And essentially what the principal and the teacher that was there was saying was that school was there to learn socialization, and competition was kind of a bad thing. No, not just kind of a bad thing. It was almost like a handicap that they said. He's really competitive. And this is what's going on in our society. Young men are not learning to be competitive. And so, they see a gal that they like. They're not going to pursue it as much as they should. They're not thinking in the respect of, okay, well, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to get married, have a family. Well, that means I need to find someone that I'm compatible with. They just kind of avoid it. And with social media nowadays, social media is destroying people's social skills. And we may wind up in a situation where people are going to grunt towards each other or something. I don't know. But I'm going to do a show later where I'm actually going to say that with advanced technology, we're going to go into a totally different way of people getting together. Now, that's one advantage, of course, that there is internet dating sites and so forth. So if you're a member of a religion, you want to marry someone of that religion, be you Jewish, Baptist, Mormon, whatever, you can find someone out there that may match you. Maybe you're, I don't know, throw out something weird like let's say you're a devout Mormon, but you're also a nudist. And it would be difficult for you to find someone that fits your particular little, I don't know what you'd call it, a fetish or preference for recreation. But if you're on the internet, you'd be able to find someone, because maybe 100 people would be, of your religion and age group, or whatever age group is, that you're willing to go for, would say, oh my gosh, 99 of them would say, that's not really what you should be doing. But one of them's going, I never knew someone out there shared my preferences. You can get together, but the problem is that if you don't have that sense of competition in the first place, you may not even have that kind of belief in yourself that you could go on a dating site and be completely forthcoming and honest and believe that there's someone out there that you could be very compatible with. In fact, you may feel, even if you did go on the site and you did get the contact information, you don't have that kind of persistence that's necessary in relationships. And believe it or not, all mammals have what you would call mating rituals. Okay? We try to hide that. We try to avoid talking about that, especially if you're religious. But then you think, well, who created the mammals? For some reason, there seems to be a pattern we find, especially in higher order mammal species, that there is a courtship ritual that takes place, and it follows certain rules. And often the female shows interest, and then the female backs off, like, oh, no. And then the male has to then show that he really is interested in that person. That takes a bit of courage. Doesn't feel good to be rejected. It doesn't feel good to be questioned. Maybe it feels better just to go home and play the newest whatever video game or whatever. But what's really required to start relationships and then maintain them is this sense, this drive of winning. Okay? Again, I said it earlier in the show, this is why psychopaths have no problem in forming relationships. They have a problem in maintaining them, but when forming them, they don't have much of a problem because they are geared to persevere and win. We could learn something from that. We have to, and even though the society may be saying, oh, no, competition's bad and so forth, it doesn't change human biology and psychology. Okay? Ultimately, it's just like what Freud said, anatomy is destiny, and you can, 1,000 years from now, it'll still be the same issues in regards to relationships. And this is something that men have to realize, especially. Okay, I know as women listen to this too, and I'll get to you guys, don't worry. But the thing is that males have had a lot of that go out there and win concept bred out of them. And I think it's intentionally, I think it has something to do with if we're going to create nice, little, cooperative, socialistic oriented people, we need to get rid of that competition. I will note, though, that if it goes against human nature, it will fail. And it can fail in ways that you may not perceive as the what would be the failing thing. But ultimately, it will not succeed. And where it might succeed, if you do create guys that are kind of like, no, I don't want to go and do all the effort that's required to meet someone and get married and start a family, it'll fail for them. Okay? If you look at history, 80% of females in our history as a species reproduced. 40% of males did. So 20% of females, but 60% of males never reproduced. And that's not all because of infertility. It has to do with, for the male, it has to do with many men just don't want to bother. Even when we did have competition, even when people were kind of pushed towards getting married, many of them didn't bother to do so. So keep these things in mind. Ultimately, the health of our society depends on it. And as I said earlier, the health of the individual can be affected as well. Anyway, take care, and hope you come back next week for another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. Take care now.